I always enjoy the start of the Christmas season with the New Yorker magazine. It's a slick publication, as you know, but every year at Christmas, they bring this before people. Yes, Virginia, there is us. Oh, hell, Virginia, we've told you 50 times, we told you once. If you know what that's about, Virginia O'Leary wrote the New York Sun in 1888, said, if I read it in the Sun, it's true. Is there a Santa Claus? And the editor began to vacillate. It doesn't come off too well, but the New Yorker has it right. Hell, Virginia, we've told you 50 times. You want to hear that again, I hope. Somebody mentioned different Christmases. Well, each is a little different from the former. You just have to be that way. We did have an interesting experience, which I want to tell you about. Just after the medium part of World War II, I was in training, and the Army decided to send me out different places doing very unusual work. I said I would do it. And the first thing we did was get down to Australia. That's a long way off. Of course, we crossed the equator, but had that little ceremony where they paddle your wampus, and that was over. When we left Australia going back to India, they tried to do it again. And we said, no, sir, once you're initiated, and since there were 2,000 GIs and only 170 sailors, we prevailed. But there's always something going on like that. We arrived in Calcutta, which is India's largest seaport, and it's 90 miles from the ocean. That doesn't make much sense, but it's true. And our great troop ship, it had 2,000 GIs with a 20,000-ton class vessel. The captain had to give his position over to a native Indian, we call it really the people of India, who knew that river so well they could keep that big boat off the rocks. It took 1 day to do the 90 miles. That's pretty slow for a large troop ship. But we did it with the care of a pilot, and it worked out very well indeed. I can remember it well. Before I got on that ship, though, something unusual had happened. I was renting a room here in Albany with Miss Mary McCollum. You all knew her, the photo shop. And she had my boss, Milt George, in an apartment upstairs. I had a little room downstairs. We had wonderful times together. Miss Mary was a genius at keeping things friendly. It seems that her daughter, Joanne, was in Atlanta at that time being treated for some illness. And she said, Walter, you're flying up to Atlanta tomorrow? Indeed, I was. There was somebody ran a little old pilot plane here. Was this Hall, that name say? Bill Hall? Well, if you don't recognize that, I just had that was his name. All he kept was a Piper, and he would take you to Atlanta for $10. And since I wanted to get a train out the day after Christmas to my home in New Jersey, I used his little air service and got up to Atlanta. But anyway, Miss Mary said, you're going to fly up there tonight. Would you take her a fur that she has down here because it's getting cold? I said, sure. We opened my suitcase, put it in, and just could cram the door shut. I was getting on the plane with a 10-pound bag of pecans. You know, everybody knew that Georgia takes pecans home to Mama. My home was New Jersey. Well, the man that ran the plane said, look, Walter, you weigh 250 pounds. I did at that time. He said, this thing's flying a little heavy. We just can't take that bag of pecans. I said, well, would it matter if I opened the suitcase and put about half of them in there? Do that if you want to. So I did. I thought how smart I was. Got to the Henry Grady Hotel in Atlanta, where I opened it to get the fur out. And of course, I forgot those 10,000 pecans. They rolled out all over the floor of the Henry Grady Hotel. 6 little midget bellboys appeared with little dust carts and little brooms. They swept them up, brought them over, and just stood over that suitcase. And finally, one of them had that says, does the gentleman want them in the suitcase? And the bellboy said, certainly the gentleman wants them in the suitcase. Everybody has pecans in the suitcase. I gave them a $10 bill, and I'm not strong on tipping, but those boys had earned it. And they're probably looking every Christmas for that nut salesman from Albany. It was a time just thinking about it gave me a kind of thrill. I'm one who enjoys every day. I'm 90, and if I don't invest the day well, I may not get one tomorrow. That's how I think about it. So I like to get some things done, and I like to remember how far back you would get. We're trying to see right here. I knew there was something unusual about Albany before I got here. This was August the 1st, 1948. I was 24 years old. It was my mother's birthday, August 1st, and I remember coming in from Leesburg. That was the only way in those days There was no Slappy Drive. They had no crossing of the creek there. You come in that back way. I began looking at signs. The first one said, Church of Christ, Eager and Slappy. That sounds like an interesting congregation. Eager and Slappy. I found out later, of course, two prominent families were represented there, the Eagers and the Slappys, for whom Slappy Boulevard has been named. But I saw that sign. Then I got into town and saw another sign. Signs make me think. It had been stretched across pine on one of those nets, so that if the wind goes through, you know, it doesn't take it down. But it was right in front of the First Baptist Church, and it said, Quiet Church. The pastor there was Dr. Leonard Stevens, and there was never a louder guy in the world. He would come into the radio station to do a devotional, and the poor girls are there typing, May I say good morning? And they jump around. Quiet church indeed. But then I turned left on Jackson. It wasn't one way then. And then left on a street that grabbed me, Flint. I thought, ooh, some of my folks have been here before me. And I proceeded about a block and saw the last sign that made sense. 2 parking meters had been removed and fastened to the section this little sign, Reserved Episcopal. Reserved Episcopal. I've always laughed every time I think of the Episcopals, who are more reserved than Presbyterians, and certainly more than Churches of Christ, who are eager to Slappy. Signs. I just made a few notes of them. I was rejoining a bunch that I had trained with in service. Their head of Milt George was our commanding officer. He was manager of WGPC when I got here. Milt George, we worked all over India and decided that after the war we might want to work together, which 4 of the 5 of us did. I had to finish college, so it was 2 years before I could do this. I was the last one to join them, and they're all dead but me. It just happens as you go. I've noticed that you die more when you're getting older. Anyway, Milt George was there. He had been the commanding officer in India. Here he just worked for one of us sergeants who happens to own the radio station. That would be Jim Woodruff, who owned 3 radio stations, and called Milt to come work. Now that my 2 years of school were over and my graduate work at Columbia, he said, come on down and look us over, Walter. So we had Milt George, Sergeant Jim Woodruff, we had Sergeant George Gingell, one of the finest people I've ever known. He used to be a writer for Sammy Kaye's book of poetry, Sunday, Saturday. George was with us, and Sergeant Walter Flint. We all had the same rank. We worked very well together. I don't think we had an pleasant note for the 7 or 8 years we were together. Then it started. Woodruff, Jim Woodruff, killed in a tragic auto accident. Sergeant George Gingell died of all manner of complications from diseases that he had fought, probably some of them in India. Oh, we had every kind of bug over there. There was Sergeant Walter Flint. He was the 4th. And as I say, I'm the only one left of that bunch. I put a note here because of the letters to Santa from the little girls and boys. That was always a pleasure. At that time, I was a little bit upset when they would start asking questions about, what can I say? I put here, they are biologically specific. Does that dolly wet? That was just the start. I think now they must have them procreating in a closet some night, because they do anything, dolls, nowadays. I just mention that because, as I say, it's enough to throw you for a tip if you're not expecting it. They told Santa Claus exactly what they want. They told me, reading the letter, please, Mr. Pronouncer, Mr. Pronouncer, and they underlined this and that. I thought, that's why kids never have nervous breakdowns. They've decided it and they're not going to play around with it. They wanted a doll that could wet and other things. Other things, blank, yeah. In 1954, we had a city manager named Don Walper. Remember him? I strongly remember him. He was run out of town after his lake fell through there on 3rd. It was a beautiful meadow. There was a gorgeous lake that they had made. When it fell through, hi Charlotte, how are you? When it fell through, he was through here. But Don was strong for making it as nice as he could. In 1954, I had just bought the house next door to where I was renting. I decided I wanted to come to Albany. I had a mother and father and sister, so I bought that house where Dr. Williamson had lived, and everything was going fine. And then this thing happened with the lake. He had hired me on Christmas that last week, Wilbur had, for the amazing sum of $75, I remember that, to be the Santa Claus on that big float in the parade. Let me tell you about those parades. They were gorgeous in those days. Our downtown decorations consisted of regular bulbs, but different colors, and a lot of Spanish moss, which didn't cost a thing for the city. I guess that's why I didn't take it. It was too cheap. But it was pretty by day and gorgeous at night. And I remind you, I know something about lights at night. You've all seen my Jaguar, or whatever I was driving that year, lined up with Santa Claus in it. Had to stop that 3 years ago because every one of us, including me, we're getting old. Gary Pritchett began helping me when he was 13 years old, and he's now 58. So we just decided they had to stop after all these years, but I miss it. I miss those sweet, the little kids, they've got no guile in them. To them, saying a dolly wets is only, was correct because people wet, or so they think. And there we are. I did try to avoid any embarrassment. Anyway, Don Wolper had hired me, and as I say, $75, and this, on that part of the check where they put the purpose of the money, it said, imposter's fee. Imposter's fee. If it weren't so nearly true, you'd laugh better, I think. How do you pay for it? How much is Santa Claus worth? Well, suppose Santa did this again next year. What would happen? I don't think we could take it as a city where we are not the same bunch that we were. No more comment is needed on that. But at any rate, I started out sitting in that big float. Bob's Candy Company had furnished us with tons, I thought, of peppermint scraps. You know, when they didn't make a perfect cake, they'd give it to the kids. I had these 2 boxes. I started throwing it out, and I saw it wasn't going to last long enough. So I started, one of the colored kids said, "Hey, Santa, quit laughing and pour out the candy." That's why kids don't have nervous breakdowns. Get it off your chest and forget about it. So, in a couple of things that might interest you, I'd been here about 6 months when I decided we got to pick this up a little bit. So I took our morning man and WALB's morning man. It was Bill Bauer. Remember Bill? I had him come to WGPC and our man go out to WALB, do the same program that they were scheduled to, but people were so confused. How come this doesn't seem to work right? And only I knew why. The next year, this is my best. The boss told me don't do any of this anymore. That's why it's my last one. I simply moved the clocks up 1 hour. Made it 1 hour later than it was. If you don't think pandemonium broke loose, if you don't think people use the radio to tell time, I will set you straight. The paymaster from Turner called, and he said, "Flint, you almost got me in an accident. This is April 1st. That's the payday. See? This is April 1st. And I could be court-martialed for being an hour late with the pay." I said, "You weren't?" He said, "No, I got there and I had to sit around and twiddle my thumbs." But people depend on who knew the difference. I enjoyed it and made a note of it. I don't try to set anything before you that you haven't thought of before, I'm sure. But isn't it so true that light follows the birth of Jesus? That people not only hear, which the music is lovely, and have wonderful things to look at, but that everything seems clearer. Without light tonight, are you getting tired, man? Without light tonight, I don't know where we would be. Something with celebration of Christianity brings together light. And the reason is quite simple. What did Jesus say? That your fellows may see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. But Jesus said, let the light shine. Don't try to hide it. And that people can see how well you're doing and to the glory of God. We all of us make noise and say things that are to our own glory sometimes, but not so with God. I did put something here that I'll bet you can tell me since you watched this. What the speed of electrons, which is my business. I'm not a theologian. My degrees are in physics and public relations. Well, at any rate, how the light that comes out of anything is the same speed as electricity in wires. Thank you, that pops around. What speed is that? Somebody know? 186,000 miles per second. Now that's moving. Light goes 7 times around the world in 1 second. Imagine now, if it can do that in 1 second, how far could it go in 1 year? That would be a light year. You can't contemplate it. It's so great. The nearest star to the Earth, they may have changed this, I saw my first planetary demonstration in the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. I was 5 years old. That was the first planetarium. And this is much nicer, more refined. But at any rate, what about 186,000 miles a second? Suppose God put a new star in orbit tonight. It's going to be a big one. Let's say it's 1 million light years away. He gives it a start there. We won't see that light until 1 million years have gone by, if it's 1 light year away. If it should burn out tonight, we'd still see it for the rest of our 1 million years. God is some engineer. And I want you to note this. He does not abrogate his laws like gravity. It's still 33 feet per second multiplied. And that's why, indeed, Jesus didn't hurl himself off the temple parapet there. He knows if he did, he would be crushed. God does not, we'll put some flypaper on this. He does not, we don't have any comprehension of how fast he is. I did say this. I saw a TV show not long ago in which an ancient artifact was picked up, and it's labeled BC 27. It's a phony. If you ever see anything with a BC on it, it's a phony. Don't buy it. How would they know what to put on it since it hasn't after the fact? Now, you might find it listing 19-something. Let's face it, folks, this was such a thing, so big, that it changed the human calendar. We like to say BC, and it's truly BC. But nobody knew that it was going to be that date. So if you get anything marked BC, it's a phony. I thought you probably know that. But if you get something marked with laughter, or little music notes, or charming little things that don't belong in a stressed out world, and believe me, we're that. Maybe that's God talking to you through his stars. Oh yes, this will interest you. The first year I put Santa on that MG automobile of mine, by the way, I then rode my bicycle for the 3 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Santa Claus was in that from the year 1960 on. The first night, and I had worked so hard, it's tricky making anything that looks lifelike, and I had contemplated the rotor experience over this hand really waved from a little motor. I was proud of it. I got up Sunday morning, we always finish it Saturday, and it had been taken from the car. Well, I told the folks, my dad said, son, this is why we need a Savior. This is why we have a Christmas, because people don't act right. He was right. My father was usually always right. And I called the police. They were very nice about it. In 15 minutes, they called back. We have it, but it's only half a Santa Claus. Yeah, it's just a torso, that's right. Well, they said, we found it on the bed of a truck out at one of these tricky places, and he said, we'll bring him by. About 20 minutes later, they come with what looks like a body bag. And they hang it like this. They put it in the driver's seat on my MG. We got him waiting, and the rest of the season was a delight. Lights are always a delight to me. And I'm so very glad that you gave me a chance to know something about them, because they really do change. One interesting thing that interested a North Georgia magazine, a very fashionable magazine, I don't know where they got the story. It is true. It happened to me. The Exchange Club here used to have their 4th of July celebration down at that lake. It's no longer a lake, you know, at Hillsman Park. And people would drag across, you know, Charlotte, weren't there a lot of people doing what they shouldn't do? And they tried to make a bathroom out of my front yard. Every dog in town knows the backyard. And anyway, we appealed to City Council to have that removed over to the airport or someplace. And we won, by the way. So this woman called. It was very, what I call a tobacco first voice. I said when I answered, well, Walter Flint, yes, that's what I say. She said, is this Walter Flint? Yes. You are an, and she didn't say the letters, she said the words. And I was momentarily inspired. I said, Mother! That got a reprint in this Georgia Living magazine, printed up around the Grange, I think. That's the only thing I've ever said or left that appears. As a matter of fact, I say it in closing, nobody's going to remember a sermon that I ever preached. Nobody's going to remember a tune that I played on the radio, but 10,000 kids will be praising Santa Claus. And I'm glad to say, I'm one of his friends, kid. I'm one of his friends. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Thanks for being so patient. I like to talk to people. On the radio, we don't always know to whom we're speaking. And of course, that complicates things. I think I'm ready to surrender this back to you. Oh, no, one quickie. A very rich couple in their Rolls Royce were touring the Georgia hills, and they came across this little church on Sunday morning, and they let us go in there and worship. So they were impressed. The preacher was apparently very good. And our rich hero grabs the preacher's hand there out the door. That was a damn good sermon, preacher. That was a damn good. Well, it was so damn good I put a $100 bill on the plate. The hell do you say? I don't know what your amount is for turn on, but you can always find somebody who'll say something that they shouldn't say. I think I've got everything here that I had written down and then some.
The first car that you used was what?
Oh, I started on an MG.
Had an MG.
And then I got a Jaguar. It was brown. It didn't look good at Christmas. So I traded in for another brand new Jaguar, which was red, and used that car for about 10 years. So, but he's been in a Jeep. He's been in a little yard vehicle. He's been in a dune buggy, a Model T Ford. Santa looked great in a Model T Ford. Great. Because you can see under it, all those lights. He's been in just about everything I could beg, borrow, or steal.
And the last car?
Porsche. And I said, how are those leather seats? One morning, Santa Claus said, sports cars are not comfortable, but they're fun. And if I didn't have arthritis, I'd be driving one tonight.
And the last Porsche is now at Faircloth?
What? That's not my car. I borrowed it from a man who's going to restore it. He says, I always gave him some money for it because I think he can use it. And I was so glad to find a car that last year's lights would fit this year. So we borrowed for 16 years that Porsche. It's got no engine, so we had to bring it in at night, lest the kids know, that's not the real thing. You don't fool kids for long. I'll tip you off on that. They have a way of finding out. A network. Anything else, madam?
Well, if you just want a remembrance of the car and the waving Santa, go out Dawson Road past the...
Oh, but that Santa doesn't look like mine.
Not at all, but it gives you
stiff.
just a little idea of what we grew up looking and enjoying. Just a little bit of an idea.
I'm glad they can put them to use because I'll tell you one thing. Santa Claus is not disappearing. Well, a lot of things are disappearing with Christmas, but Santa ain't one of them. He's going to be a big thing. As I say, they'll remember me and Santa when all the sermons are forgotten. Where's my framework? Get out of here tonight.
Walker is behind you.
All right. Oh, fine. My cane is where? Over there. I need that too.
Thank you, Walter. We do appreciate
You're welcome,
you.
Doc. One nice thing about being 90, I can say no sometimes and mean it. But I'm glad to say yes and see your smiling faces.